We are back.
In a garden.
In a garden. In your beautiful garden.
Well, it's my garden. I don't know how beautiful it is.
With a nice little rowan tree behind us and
Yeah.
and I don't know what this one is.
It's crabapple, I think.
Crabapple tree, yes. And it's actually the first time we've sat together to record Rev Chat since March.
It's mad, isn't it? So 6 months ago.
A long time ago. Some people probably say that's good. But, you know, as you've been watching over the past few weeks, of course, the Reverend Neary very kindly came back off her holiday each week to record the episodes.
Amazing, yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was very, very good of her, because I doubt I would do the same when I'm on holiday in a few weeks' time.
I've been planning that, actually.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about whether I'm going to have guests.
No, we're going to do it.
Oh, are we?
I think we're just going to do it.
We're going to do like we did. We better start tomorrow.
Let's go
Okay.
for it. Let's go for it.
Well, it's nice to be back within a socially distanced distance.
It is.
Even if the sound of the traffic is slightly loud, but
That's
we'll
okay.
be okay.
That's okay. It's real,
It is real.
as opposed to surreal.
When Harry was setting the shot up for us, I asked him how we looked. He said,
We looked like two debonair, suave, sophisticated and handsome vicars, or was it two old vicars?
two old vicars
that's
sitting
right.
in a garden.
That's right.
Absolutely outrageous.
Well, he's absolutely right on one account. I don't know about you, though, but
I was moaning actually about our website photos, which are both very out of date. And I said perhaps we ought to do some new ones. And he said, you look older now. Do you really want to get rid of the picture that's 5 years ago?
Yeah. Well, I think I look more cultured and debonair. With
Is that what it is?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. All right,
I think a picture of us perhaps dressed in our robes or something, you know, which hides a lot of the...
And a mask.
And a mask. I think present reality has to be recorded.
Okay, we better pause because we're on a shorter timescale than we are on Zoom, which again is probably no bad thing. So let's pause. So we're still in Matthew's Gospel.
We are.
And we're thinking about forgiveness,
We are.
which is a thorny issue, I would say. Well,
We'll see.
We'll see. Shall we hear
Please read on.
what Matthew's Gospel has to say about it? So this is Matthew 18, verses 21 to 35. It's quite a long bit.
It's okay.
Then Peter came and said to Jesus, Lord, if another member of the church sins against me, how often should I forgive? As many as 7 times. Jesus said to him, not 7 times, but I tell you 77 times. For this reason the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who wished to settle accounts with his slaves. When he began the reckoning, one who owed him 10,000 talents was brought to him. And as he could not pay, his lord ordered him to be sold, together with his wife and children and all his possessions, and payment to be made. So the slave fell on his knees before him, saying, have patience with me, and I will pay you everything. And out of pity for him, the lord of that slave released him and forgave him the debt. But that same slave, as he went out, came upon one of his fellow slaves who owed him 100 denarii, and seizing him by the throat, he said, pay what you owe. Then his fellow slave fell down and pleaded with him, have patience with me, and I will pay you. But he refused. Then he went and threw him into prison until he should pay the debt. When his fellow slaves saw what had happened, they were greatly distressed, and they went and reported to their lord all that had taken place. Then his lord summoned him and said to him, you wicked slave, I forgave you all that debt because you pleaded with me. Should you not have had mercy on your fellow slave as I had mercy on you? And in anger his lord handed him over to be tortured until he should pay his entire debt. So my heavenly Father will also do to every one of you if you do not forgive your brother or sister from your heart.
Of course, it follows on from last week's story, or reading. I don't know if I want to call it a story, but reading.
Yeah.
And it's about order in the church, isn't it?
Yeah, so last week was about disputes, wasn't it? If you fall out with somebody.
But it's all about order in the church. And I read somewhere in one of the commentaries that it suggests that Matthew's church was unordered and he was trying to get control. But a lot of
Not different from any of ours then.
but lots of other commentaries, and I did look at 3 or 4 for preparation for sermons, of course, last Sunday. But most of the others all suggested that actually there's no real proof or evidence that Matthew's church was a disorder.
Okay.
He's just trying to teach them about guidance and law and rules and
How to live.
And forgiveness, of course, is a central tenet of Christian faith.
Absolutely. And it's something that there's often amazing examples of people who have Christian faith and forgive in really pressing circumstances. And they're amazing examples to the rest of the world, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
And I often think about the chap in Enniskillen was the guy who set up, there was a whole peace and reconciliation place set up after that. And those who were able to forgive captors for keeping them captive, or forgive people who've murdered people in their families, I mean, quite astounding.
Stephen Lawrence's mum.
Yeah.
Being keen. And one of the chaps who was on my year, in my course at theological college, he was a corporal in charge of the brigade at Enniskillen on that day.
Really?
And he taught himself through faith to be able to forgive, which is quite an astounding thing for something like that, isn't it?
It is.
I agree entirely.
In the passage, in the story, it suggests that one of the punishments for people not being able to forgive is torture. And in anger, his Lord handed him over to be tortured. But it's interesting because often if you're unable to forgive, you are kind of caught in a bit of a torturous place, aren't you? And actually the pain of holding on to that pain and hurt and suffering can just almost overwhelm people, can't it?
Yeah, I think I've always believed and found that you torture yourself if you hold something against somebody else. You know, it may just be a grudge because somebody said something to you, or they're nasty. That person never worries in the least, but you hold the pain, don't you? Because so if it's if your son has been murdered or your daughter's been run over by a hit and run driver, I know that's a totally different thing to somebody saying nasty things to you. But holding the hatred in is a second form of punishment to yourself in some way. But I don't know what position I would be in if just me having to suffer that. I hope that I'd be able to see that through it all, searching for a way to handle it, and forgiveness being one, could be possible. Yeah,
and I think that if you Google forgiveness or inspiring quotes about forgiveness, I mean, there's just all kinds of stuff. And people of faith and people of no faith and everything have sort of, you can have truisms, things that you'd find written on your fridge. But it is, forgiving isn't about condoning. It's not about saying it's okay that I've been hurt.
No.
And it's not about forgetting.
No.
Because, again, one of the things that, a bit like saying sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Absolute rubbish. Words do hurt people. Same forgive and forget. No. Forgetting is not part of the option, I think. But forgiveness is a kind of hugely generous act, in a way, of letting go of the pain and the suffering and being free, both for the person who's been wronged, but potentially setting free the person who's committed the crime or the hurt.
I think what that does to the person who's committed the offence is that it shows that through all, forgiveness, love, is much stronger than the act that you've done.
Yeah.
And I think that is key to life, because the commandments of Jesus, as opposed to the 10 commandments, are love God, love your neighbour as yourself.
Yeah.
The neighbour is the person who's wronged you.
Yeah.
Not just the person who lives next door to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that is central. And that was part of the teaching which went alongside last week's Matthew's Gospel from Paul's letter to the Romans. Not
nice
to. It's an helicopter, people. Don't worry. It's probably an air ambulance or something. We don't know. But it is this whole this old understanding that part of the instructions from Jesus, of which Matthew is now embodied in that because of the Christian, that we keep calling it church. It wouldn't have been a church.
No, group of people who were following Jesus.
Groups of people who are following Jesus. But if you're going to live your life following Jesus, there are certain things that Jesus demands of us. Last week we heard, take up your cross, follow me, etc. And taking up your cross is about bearing the burdens of the world and other people. And not only do you take up your cross, but you have to love God and you have to love your neighbour as yourself.
And when things go wrong, which they inevitably do, there has to be reconciliation, as we were talking about last week, about going and making peace with people.
Yeah.
And then and the need for forgiveness goes hand in hand, because you might be able to sort out your differences, but unless you can let go of the fear and the hatred and all the other things that come with it, the forgiveness, you need to be able to forgive. You can't move forward. And Peter, of course, knew a bit about forgiveness, didn't he?
He did.
Because he screwed up mightily.
Yeah.
And Jesus forgave him.
Yeah, Peter is us, the human side of life, isn't it? And yes, he screwed up. I screw up. I'm sure you wouldn't, but I certainly do.
Yes, practically perfect, just like Mary Poppins.
And exactly. And as I used an example last week when I was talking about that last thing, but it does pass on into this week's reading. Part of living the Christian life means that we have a code of conduct to a degree, or something that supports us in our faith. That trellis of Simon Reed's.
Yeah.
And we call it a rule of life, or a way of life, or a whatever. People have different ways, and they're not laws to tie you up or things to control you. They're just saying, as a Christian, Jesus expects this of us, of which loving your neighbour, being kind to society. How do you do all of that? Is crucial. And one of our churches, as we know, which has regular, sadly, differences of opinion amongst the congregation. I was there last week, and I could see the pain for some of them, and it wasn't picking on them or trying to say, because I said the same at other churches. I said there that part of Christian living, Christian community living, is that we cannot keep on holding this. We've got to love each other. And that wonderful story, as you say, about you wicked slave, I gave you everything, but look what you've done. That so often happens, and Christian communities, of course, aren't exempt from having problems amongst themselves.
Well, and the essence of Christian life is that we're forgiven by God, and so we have to do the same to other people in his community. Absolutely. It's passing on that gift of forgiveness and generosity to each other. Absolutely.
Yeah. Obviously, dear viewers, you can see the locality of Broad Windsor are extremely noisy. It's a bit like the difference between Manchester City and Manchester United, the noisy neighbours. Obviously, Broad Windsor is the place. And if you're in America, you may not understand about noisy neighbours, but there we are.
I think that's probably it. We've had a helicopter, tractors, lorry, and the chatty school run going past. So.
And a bird.
And a bird.
And a bird. You thought he was a squirrel. I think he was a bird. There was a beautiful robin I was watching over there a little earlier. Not that I wasn't listening to you, because I was. And the beautiful butterfly over there. It's been great to be back together.
It has.
And to be able to record this good. This is number 41. When Harry put number 40 last week, I was stunned.
I know. 41. We're about to run out of time as well.
Bye-bye. You can follow us on all the usual things.
See you soon. See you next week. Bye-bye.